para poder tomar ventaja de todos estos nuevos insights, nuestro siguiente invitado les va a hablar de las ventajas de las tecnologías analíticas. Alex Kwiatkowski is SaaS's industry lead for banking and capital markets. His role centers on articulating and amplifying company strategy and point of view to C-level executives, partners, media, and influencers, along with creating powerful narratives and compelling content for thought leadership purposes. With a career spanning over 15 years in the financial services industry and a decade spent in the fast-moving telco world before that, Alex is a veritable mind of significant and valuable knowledge. He's full of keen insights into how the sector must evolve, is blessed with a restless curiosity to explore and challenge traditional thinking, and possesses an unquenchable thirst for discovering new information, from the trivial to the revelatory, to help form his opinions. A regular speaker at major global industry conferences, including the Asian Bankers Summit, the Retail Banking Europe, the Financial Times Middle East Banking Forum, and Retail Banking Asia, Alex is an energized and engaging keynote willing to tackle the biggest and most controversial issues head-on. So please welcome Alex Kwiatkowski, Principal Industry Consultant, Global Banking Practice.
Carlos, muchas gracias. That was a very nice introduction. Thank you very much. Hola, buenos dias, everybody. I am Alex Kwiatkowski. I am an industry principal in the global financial services practice here at SAS, and it's my pleasure to be able to speak to you today from the UK in the middle of a heat wave, which is something of a rarity, in the middle of a pandemic, which is also something of a rarity. And what I would like to do is to spend a little bit of time together where we can think about how we can rethink customer experience in the new normal, and maybe we can also start thinking about it in the next normal as well. Now, I've had the honor, the privilege to follow Laura, who's given you many, many insights from her perspective. I don't think I will sharply contradict anything that Laura has said. I think I will just build upon that. And then my colleagues, Rodrigo and Gustavo, they will then build upon some of the things that I'm going to share with you right now. Let me start just by sharing this. Of course, it's not a schoolyard or a school classroom reminder of what we're looking at today. It's actually more than that. If we think about the region of Mexico, of the Caribbean, of Central America, the way that I think about it is that if we think about it in terms of how many people are there in this region. Now, you may have a slightly different figure than mine, but by my calculation, we're talking about 218 million people. Now, there'll be a mixture of course, young and old, those that have different wants and needs and preferences. But there are 218 million individuals in the region that we're discussing, and we must always think about them as just that, as an individual. What I might think as a great customer experience, somebody else may think of as average, or somebody may think that something is fantastic, and yet I think it's a little bit underwhelming. So it's important to remember that when we're talking about customer experiences, we're all allowed to have a different opinion. Now, I've got an opinion on everything, whether it's about financial services, politics, economics, society, geography, history, sport. Don't start me on sport because we will quite simply never finish this webinar. But I'll just concentrate today on my opinions on financial services. But before we get to some of those and thinking about the new normal and the next normal, I've got to acknowledge where we are right now. Now, no matter where you were this morning when the sun came up, when the dawn broke, and I was overlooking just to my left the sea off the south coast of England. You may have been looking at the Gulf of Mexico. You could have been looking at the Caribbean. You could have been nearer to the Pacific. We're all in the middle of this terrible, there's no other word for it, of this terrible pandemic. And we are all having to adjust to things that we never thought we would have to adjust to. First and foremost, I And I'm sure the whole of SAS and Laura and Carlos wish to send our best wishes to you, our clients, our prospects, our partners, your family, your friends, and just to hope that you're coping okay in these very difficult conditions, in these crazy times. But the world has been through difficult conditions before. It's been through crazy times before. We perhaps have never been through an era like this, and yet we've got so much, perhaps, technology supporting us to help us find a way through this particular storm that we've managed to get into the middle of. I'm quite comfortable that we will find a way forward, and whilst it's difficult today, in fact, look, let me say this perhaps in a better way, because you've got a brilliant proverb in Spanish, which my Spanish is not very good, but you can read this proverb as I read it, which is al mal tiempo buena cara, which, if I'm right, it says, to a bad face, there will be good times. Keep smiling. Or in bad times, there will be a good face. So that although this is a very difficult time that the world finds itself in, individually, collectively, for businesses, for individual citizens, for governments, for financial services firms, for manufacturers, for everybody, there will at some point be better times lying ahead. And if there are, and not if, but when those better times arrive, it's very important to make sure that customer experience can be as good as it can be in the face of some difficult conditions that we're in right now, but also having a look to the future as to how the world is changing already and how it's going to change once more and once more after that. Because we are always in a constant transition. We're always changing. My hair is getting a little bit grayer. It could be getting a little bit thinner. My knowledge is getting a little bit more. My body is telling me that I can't run or cycle or swim quite as far as I used to. So the world is always in a degree of change. At the moment in the pandemic, that change is magnified, it's amplified, it's made even more significant. And so therefore, it's very important for financial services firms to adapt to the changing needs of their customers. So what is the new normal? And I'm sure over the next few slides, we can identify things in our lives that are directly comparable to what I'm talking about. Let's start with this. In the past, in the old world, typically we could have been in a venue together rather than being on a webinar where I'm looking at you through to the lens and you're looking at me through your screen. We've made that transition from in-person meetings to now making use of digital technologies that allow us to connect seamlessly around the world. Now, we could do that before the pandemic because there's been technology available to do that, but it really has come into its own. Video, digital, real-time interaction has really helped through this first phase of the pandemic, which means that you can sit around the region in Mexico, in the Caribbean, in Central America, and I can sit in the south coast of the United Kingdom, and we can have this very open discussion. You can ask me questions using the chat menu. We can connect afterwards, and we can have a greater and longer conversation about anything that I have said or that my SAS colleagues have said, that Laura has said, that Carlos has said. We can just keep interacting with one another through digital. And of course, I'll come back to speak about digital again in a moment. But there are other things that have changed in our world. We used to be able to go and do this. It was quite easy that if I wanted to go to visit a bank branch or the branch of an insurance company, there was likely to be a branch that would have been near to me wherever I happened to be. Now, if I look at some of the banks and the insurers in operation in Mexico and in Central America, of course, changes have had to be made to the way that you interact and transact with a physical location. So, of course, we've now made great use of digital technologies, whether it's smartphones, whether it's tablet devices, But what we've had to do is get used to this world very, very quickly. If I look at particular countries in the region, some have perhaps made some more progress at a faster pace than others. That was happening before the pandemic. But what the pandemic has shown us, and I know that Laura spoke to some of this, is the need to digitalize even faster. But it's not just about speed. It's about the depth as well. You can't just digitalize your front office. You've got to digitalize your middle office and digitalize your back office as well. Otherwise, you will never have end-to-end digital transformation, and you will never be, as a financial services firm, a bank, an insurer, a wealth manager, you will never be as operationally efficient as you could be had you been able to digitalize from end to end as well. Think of some of the other things we used to do. We used to pay with the cash, the notes and the coins that were in our wallets and in our purses. We would be handing over pesos, of dollars, of pounds, of whatever currency. And of course, now we can't do that quite so easily because merchants are perhaps more reluctant to accept cash because of not just the costs of handling cash, but because cash can be seen as a transmission point for COVID-19. So, of course, we now see, where possible, a transition from the traditional methods of payment towards the electronic methods of payment, whether it's contactless through a smart card or whether it's contactless through, again, the mobile device. I must stop there and say that we must also recognize that in a world where there is the unbanked and the underbanked, we shouldn't just talk about financial services for those who are in the privileged category. We must also remember in the middle of a pandemic, we have customers who are perhaps less advantaged. They perhaps have not as much wealth that they've accumulated, and we mustn't, absolutely must not, as an industry, leave those customers behind. We must try everything possible to make sure that we connect the unbanked and the underbanked to the financial services system rather than letting the distance, the gap, open up even wider. So the comments that I make today about customer experience are designed really with two audiences in mind. There are the customers who are already making good use of financial services, banking, insurance, and other products, and those who have yet to really get the full benefit from financial services and perhaps have more basic services provided at the moment. So let's remember that we must just always keep in mind those who have different needs than just the very wealthiest and customers that a bank or insurer may have. So against that context, against that backdrop, what needs to happen? What actions must banks and insurers take to propel themselves back to growth in the middle of a pandemic? How is this new normal going to play out? If we think about some tactics, some strategies, many of you may have already seen this report from McKinsey, which was published earlier in the summer, in May, and you can see that by its title, it says that we're not going back. These are the new imperatives for European banking. You might be thinking, why is Alex talking about European banking on a webinar designed for a Central American and Caribbean audience? The answer is quite simple. Although it says imperatives for European banking, it actually is imperatives for banking everywhere, whether you're in the Americas, whether you're in the Middle East and Africa, whether you're in Asia. These three things, which McKinsey identified and I'm going to share here, are the three things that I think really make a big difference. They perhaps won't surprise you, because some of them may be quite obvious, but sometimes the obvious things that we can forget and that we overlook. So first and foremost, follow the customer. Do everything possible to understand customer needs, wants, and behaviors both today and in the future, the near term, the medium term, and the long term. And of course, analytics is the perfect way in which to help with that. Number two, which is this idea of getting fitter for tougher times. undoubtedly we are in some tough times at the moment. And it's been true that if you are anyone interested in history or in the development of the human race, it's been said that only the fittest survive. That was true of the dinosaurs. It's true to today. Only the fittest will survive. The fittest companies, not so much the fittest individuals, but banks and insurers need to be fit for the difficult times that they're in right now and for the times that lie ahead. And that means doing all the work which has already gone into motion around operational efficiency, making cost savings where necessary, removing redundant manual processes in favor of automation, making use of data rather than trying to guess which way the wind is blowing, actually know with certainty which way that wind is blowing and which direction you as a bank or an insurer you need to go in. And the third one is protect and grow the bank. Well, of course, you need to be able to protect revenues in a difficult economic environment where the risk of non-performing loans, of loans that were good then turning substandard, has increased significantly. But also making sure that in order to grow the bank, you have to make sure that everything you do for your customer is as good as it can be. It is as simple as that. If you make a promise, keep that promise. If you want to attract good customers, give them a reason to want to continue to give business to your firm. Give them the next best offer, the next best action. Treat them as an individual, not as a number. Understand them as an individual. Don't just use blanket segmentation, demographics, age, income, residential status, home ownership, for example, or renting, or any other criteria. Understand the customer as best you can as an individual, because that's what makes a difference. For those of you who come from the insurance world, I've also got some thoughts, again, amplified from McKinsey's report from the same time horizon from May of this year, around how digital and analytics imperatives really help insurers go back to a pathway of growth as well. Now, I had 3 things for banking. I've got some more things for insurance. So I'll step through them a little bit faster, if I may. It's about digitalizing all of the interaction points. Laura talked about omni-channel in her remarks. I will echo that, is that having that right channel at the right time for the right interaction or transaction for the right customer, whether it's submitting an insurance claim, whether it's wanting to obtain an insurance policy, always make sure that everything is as digitalized as it can be. Why? Because if you then think about some of the other aspects around customer lifetime value modeling, which helps to identify those customers who are worth engaging with for a long-term relationship, because not all customers, of course, are good customers, but customer lifetime value modeling helps identify those customers who are important to you today and who will be important to you tomorrow and the day after and for the entire length of the relationship that you have with them. Make underwriting much easier. Use digital sources of information to help make an underwriting decision. There are many different ways in which to do that. Now is perhaps not the time to speak to them, but we can certainly speak about them at a separate time. Of course, another topic to make use of is the use of artificial intelligence to offer a more empathetic service so that you really demonstrate that you do understand the customer. And that you don't just say nice words, your actions are equally supportive of the words that you are saying or sending in an email, on your website, in a letter. So make sure you have empathy, understanding. In the same way that you can transform the payout process. So you can transform that from the very beginning to the very end, from intake to payout. Make claims submissions much easier and faster than they are now, again, using technology. Technology also helps you to reskill and find new ways of working amongst your employee base, those that have had to now start working remotely. And also use technology to identify those new products and ecosystems to sell those products that allows you to drive growth for today and for tomorrow. So they were 7 things for insurance and 3 things for banking. So 10 things in total that I think you need to do if you're a bank or an insurer to return to a path of growth as the pandemic, which we are still in the middle of, as we start to move towards a recovery and then the chance to reimagine the world of financial services that we inhabit. Now, if we think specifically about the customer should be right at the center. The heart of everything we do should be driven by the customer. I hope those customers of SaaS, and thank you for being a client, recognize that we put you at the center of what we do, but also we want to help you to satisfy your customers as well, whether you're a bank or an insurer. And so if we think about winning in the next normal, you can read this faster than I can say it, but let's read it together. To win in the next normal, customers need to identify the current behaviors that will define customer experience in the near term. Again, it's a very perhaps obvious thing to say, but sometimes it's those obvious things that get overlooked. And it comes back to, once again, 3 things. 3 priority actions that need to be taken. Of course, there's more digital. There's the ability to interact and transact safely in a contactless way, which means that the old normal has become the new normal, and I'll speak to some of that in a moment, and the need for dynamic customer insight. And then we'll go into talking about that in a little more detail. But very briefly, to the surprise of nobody, to have that customer experience in a world where we've got social distancing in place, we can only look to, again, digital devices from which to help us to interact and transact. It's not just enough to give the customer the ability to do everything via self-service. The bank, the insurer, also needs to be able to engage with that customer, not just have it as a self-service interaction or transaction, but where necessary, to interact. So that can be through a number of different ways. It can be through video-based agent discussions. It can be through having greater granularity around and greater knowledge and insight around customer behaviors, needs, wants, and preferences. But it begins and has throughout and ends. In fact, the journey never ends, but it's continuously about understanding what the data is telling you, ideally in real time. If you understand what's happening in real time, you can also make a decision as to how to best capitalize on an opportunity, or to do, again, next best action, next best offer, something which the customer is going to benefit from in real time as well. This is the reality. We have to be socially distant wherever, or rather whenever we are in public. Whether we're wearing face masks, we're keeping a safe distance away from the people around us. That's what doing business is going to be like. Many of you have already had to temporarily close your branch offices, and some of your regional offices as well have also closed as we've had to go to a new way of working. Being able to offer safe, contactless ways of interacting and transacting for the best possible experience is simply what we have to do right now. It's not optional, it's essential. Essentially, if we're going to reduce the impact of the pandemic, whether there's a vaccine which is created and released quickly, or whether it is some time away. The new normal is about adapting to this need to be in a safe, contactless environment. That means, from a payments perspective, making greater use of electronic payments via card, through a contactless terminal, reducing the amount of cash in circulation. It means that if we are going to have branches reopening, they need to be signed correctly and operating a socially distant way. I would suggest that no customer wants to visit a bank or an insurer or a retailer, an automotive dealership, or any organization and come back having contracted, or shortly after having contracted, COVID-19. So the second priority is to make sure that in this new normal, it's about a contactless experience, a distant experience, but a good experience. And the third part that leads and lends itself to that, how do you make a good experience? That's around dynamic customer insights. So the ability to have actually 3 things. Hindsight, what happened? Insight, what's happening right now? And foresight, what's going to happen? What's going to happen next? What will my customer want to do? Are they likely to be asking for financial hardship relief? Are they going to need to have a loan? Are they likely to make an insurance claim anytime soon because they perhaps now have a member of their family that started to drive and has maybe a little bit less experience than a driver that's been on the road for a greater length of time? What's happened? What's happening? What's going to happen? Those dynamic insights that then allow for campaigns to be adjusted, to make greater use of analytics to actually understand what's working and what's not, to dynamically adjust marketing campaigns in real time, to make personalization offers that are relevant to the market of one. Give me an offer that just feels like it's for me, not everybody else in the world, just for me. That would be nice. And it's perfectly possible. And I'm sure that when we get to the presentation from my colleagues Rodrigo and Gustavo, we'll talk about that in a little more detail. Now, many of you will, of course, know the enabling role of analytics, so forgive me for just telling you things that you do know already. But analytics is about sort of four things: understanding organizational needs and designing the right response, understanding the customer's needs and identifying proactive ways to serve them, optimizing constrained resources, never more constrained than right now in the pandemic, and to be able to forecast accurately the impact on finances and other key performance indicators. If you know SaaS, you'll know this, that in financial services, we look at things through, again, three. I love things that coming in threes, the power of three. Three things that we focus on: customer intelligence, fraud and financial crime, detection and prevention, and risk management. And it's about making the right decision in all of these areas. But today, we're going to specifically concentrate on customer intelligence. How can we help? Well, we help by optimizing your ability to improve the lives of your customers, wherever they may be, everywhere in the region, and of course, for SaaS, everywhere in the world. We exist because data doesn't drive your bank, it doesn't drive your insurer. Decisions do that. Those decisions that are taken in a transaction, in your boardroom, in lending, in fraud and financial crime detection, in compliance, in the customer journey, in the digital world, at the front line, everywhere there is a decision. And our role is to help you accelerate your path from data to decisions, to make the right decision every time in the shortest amount of time, to make better decisions, to maximize business value, to deliver trusted outcomes, and, as I just said, to make better decisions. We all know what a bad decision looks like. There's plenty of evidence in the financial services industry of bad decisions in previous eras. But now let's make good decisions based on analytics. Advanced analytics, how we optimize those decisions. This slide is much too busy to speak to in detail, but let me just ask you to look at these outcomes on the right-hand side. If you use analytics, you can become a digitalized bank or a digitalized insurer. In a dynamic market environment, it means that you remain relevant. You have a competitive cost base, which means that you are fit for purpose. You have increased revenue because you have happier customers. If you have happier customers, you're likely to have happier shareholders for investor sentiment as well. And you should always be in a regulated industry in step with your regulators. So if we think about decisioning, not just in these areas, but in this area in particular, of customer intelligence, of customer decisioning, of customer insight, of personalized marketing, there are many common questions that we are asked all the time. How do I get a holistic view of the client base? How can I optimize my marketing campaigns and my marketing resources, ideally in real time? How can I deliver a personalized experience? How can I keep pace with digitally driven transformation? How can I understand client behaviors across many different channels, physical channels and digital channels? These aren't the only 6 questions that we get asked a lot. But these are 6 of the main questions that I hear frequently from clients across the world. And what we do as a couple of examples, is how do we help customers get closer to their customer? For example, deepening and strengthening the relationship between bank and customer. Well, in this case, we help you to generate substantial business value, help you find new ways to create new experiences for your customers, to improve campaign conversion rates, that return on marketing investment, ROMI, that not many people talk about. And we help increase revenue as well. And we've got many examples where we're working with banks to do just that. In this case, using our SaaS 360 Engage solution. I won't talk about it now, but we can certainly talk to you about it at a point convenient and comfortable with you. And then one last example before I conclude is that if we think about this, the right offer at the right time, contextual marketing, right offer, right time, right channel, right customer, that ability to find new ways, the best ways to reach the right customers with relevant offers that they end up going, yes, I would like to take that new product or service that you are offering to me. It helps improve customer satisfaction. It, again, reduces the costs of campaigning if you can be more targeted, be more specific, and it increases efficiency. So those elements that I spoke of around being fit for the future, about being closer to the customer, about adapting to a world of digital, to use artificial intelligence, advanced analytics to make the right decision, that's all available right now, where it is, I think, 10:23 in the morning where you are. It is 5:23 in the afternoon where I am, but all of these things are available right now. And we use that through SaaS marketing optimization. And I'll end with this, which is not just a very nice view of a highway in Mexico, but it's an obvious thing to say that we are on a hard journey, but even the hardest journeys on the highway, across the sea, up the mountain, takes one step at a time. But we must keep on stepping in the new normal and in the next normal. And with that, I will simply say this. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you. It's always a pleasure. If you'd like to connect with me, if we're not already members and on LinkedIn and connected to each other, I would love to add you as part of my network. It would be a real privilege to connect with you. So with that, I will say once again, muchas gracias.